This weekend, our 181st Diocesan Convention was held in Lombard, Illinois. It was a time of fellowship and discernment as delegates attended to the work of the church in the Diocese of Chicago. As I walked around the convention center, I saw many of the delegates, including our own from St. Thomas, wearing a pin emblazoned with the Episcopal shield and the words of challenge from our presiding Bishop, Michael Curry. Love is the way. Love is the way. The Apostle Paul admonishes us in the reading from Hebrews, which you heard this morning, and let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And Jesus himself summed it up when he said, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Love is the way. When I was a soldier serving in Kuwait, a fellow soldier and friend expressed his excitement about the things we were experiencing while in the Middle East. He was excited about many things that he had experienced and acquired when we were able to get away every now and then and venture into the city. But he was particularly excited about the fact that he had purchased a very expensive Rolex watch for the bargain price of $35 US. In fact, as he flashed it before me, I first became envious and then upset that he had not purchased one for me. But later on, when we got back to camp, and as he showed it off, I noticed that a piece of something fell from his arm. Indeed, upon closer examination, I noticed that it was a piece of his bargain basement Rolex watch. And as my friend stooped down to pick up the broken piece, his eyes met mine. And without any exchange of words at all, we both knew that his bargain basement Rolex watch was not for real. Instead, it was nothing more than a cheap imitation. You see, it was attractive, but it was not authentic. It was glittery, but it was not genuine. It was pretty, but it was not pure. It was fashionable, but it was not functioning. It was stylish, but it was not sound. It was ticking, but it was not true. It was running, but it was not real. Indeed, he had been sold a false bill of goods. To be sure, beloved, this incident is a reminder to all of us that we, the church, are called to witness and to make disciples for Jesus Christ in a society in which so many people have been sold a false bill of goods. Evangelical Christians are selling us a false bill of goods. In fact, recent polls reveal that many people say they believe in God, but they are suspicious of organized religion. This skepticism is reinforced by the fact that we live in a society in which it is difficult to tell the real from from the unreal. In fact, there was one morning I saw my grandmother on the porch. She had a row of flowers that she would water every morning, and for a special occasion, someone had sent her a fake bouquet, and they ended up in that row of flowers, and I saw her watering the artificial flowers that she had received. Our culture is fascinated with its look-alike contest. The late comedian Groucho Marx said that he once entered a Groucho Marx look-alike contest and came in third. In the eyes of the judges, somebody else looked more like Groucho Marx than he did himself. Therefore, in a society in which it is often difficult to tell the real from the unreal, we should not be surprised that many people are suspicious of us and are quick to ask the question, are you for real? Oh, they hear our pious platitudes. They see our pretty processions. They read about all our promotional programs. They take notice of our prophetic pronouncements. They are impressed with our professional preparation, but they don't care how much we know until they know how much we genuinely care. Deep down within, they want to know if our deeds match up with our creeds. They want to know if our love service matches up with our lip service. They not only want to know if we can talk the talk, they want to know if we can also walk the walk. Indeed, such suspicious people who have been sold a false bill of goods are looking for the real thing. I'm reminded of the story of the young man who was seen leaving church before the worship service was over. An usher said to him, "Are you leaving the church?" He said, "No, I'm not leaving the church. I'm looking for it." Now please note that this is not a new challenge for the people of God. Indeed, it was the same challenge that faced Jesus and the disciples in the 13th chapter of John's Gospel that we attached on to this morning. Here we find Jesus in the upper room where he was preparing to share the Passover meal with his disciples. And to be sure, it was a critical and challenging time because he knew that he would soon be leaving them and that they could no longer depend on his physical presence as their badge of identification. Likewise, Jesus knew that his disciples would be faced with a suspicious society who had been sold a false bill of goods and would want to know if the disciples were for real, or whether they were nothing more than another cheap imitation. In fact, Jesus himself was not exempt from the suspicious questions of those who were looking for the real thing. You remember that even John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus, became so suspicious of Jesus that he sent some of his followers to Jesus and had them to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" In other words, John was asking Jesus, "Are you for real?" Now please notice that Jesus did not try to escape the question as we read that. Indeed, Jesus had to deal with the question because he knew it was a legitimate one. So he said to the followers of John, "You go and tell John what you see and what you hear. Tell him the blind receive their sight. Tell John that the lame walk. Tell John the lepers are cleansed. Tell John the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." So Jesus knew that if suspicious people who had been sold a false bill of goods dared to ask him, "Are you for real?" surely his disciples would not be exempt from the same question. Therefore, Jesus wanted to help the disciples to understand how to get real. Indeed, he wanted to give them a badge of identification that would clearly identify them as his disciples and let every suspicious person know that they were truly for real. But please note that Jesus did not say to them that suspicious people would know that they were for real by what they said. He didn't say that suspicious people would know that they were for real by how they dressed, or by what they knew, or by their religious affiliation, or by how they sing, or by their oratorical skills, or by their degrees, or by their color, or by their social standing in the community. Instead, Jesus said, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." Now, it is important to note that this love command is not new in the sense that it was given for the first time. In fact, in Leviticus, the law of Israel had long since required love from the Jews. Leviticus says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." But in our get real moments, we know that it is difficult for us to love one another, even within the church. We're not always lovable because we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Therefore, Jesus knows that we need some divine help in order to obey the command to love one another. Indeed, that is precisely why the newness of the command given by Jesus is that his disciples were required to have the same kind of love for one another that Jesus first had for them. Jesus said, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another." Just as I have loved you. Just as I have loved you is the enabling act of this new command. You see, Jesus knows that his love cannot happen through us unless it first of all happens to us. Until we have first experienced what it means to be loved. 1 John says we love because he first loved us. Let me see if I can illustrate this point. There was a famous plastic surgeon, Maxwell Maltz, who wrote a book called Dr. Pygmalion, in which he tells a story that gives us an example of the kind of liberating love that Jesus has for us. He said that one day, a woman invited him to her family's home to talk about the medical condition of her husband. As they sat and talked, she told him that after she and her husband married, they moved into a new home, and he invited his mother and his disabled brother to live in the far wing of the house. She told him that one night a fire broke out in that wing, and his mother and brother lost their lives in spite of her husband's frantic efforts to save them. In fact, she said that her husband was so horribly burned and his face so badly disfigured. Since that time, he had stayed in his room and would not let anyone come near him because he believed that they would reject him because of his scars. Upon hearing this woman's story, Maltz quickly assured her that he could perform surgery on her husband and restore his face. But she said, "You don't understand. He thinks that God disfigured his face to punish him for failing to save his mother and brother, so he refuses to have surgery." She said, "What I want you to do is operate on me and disfigure my face like his so that we can be together again." Of course, Maltz would not agree to that, but he was moved deeply by that wife's determination and her total love. And he got her permission to try to talk to her husband, and he went to the man's room and he knocked, but there was no answer. He called loudly through the door. He said, "I know you're in there, and I know you can hear me, so I've come to tell you that my name is Dr. Maxwell Maltz. I I'm a plastic surgeon, and I want you to know that I can restore your face. There was no response. Again, he called loud and he said, please come out and let me help restore your face. But again, there was no answer. Still speaking through the door, Maltz told the man that his wife was asking him to do something. He said, she wants me to disfigure her face, to make her face like yours, and hope that you will let her back into your life. That's how much she loves you. That's how much she wants to help you. There was a brief moment of silence, and then ever so slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Finally, the disfigured man came out of his self-imposed prison. He was so overwhelmed by his wife's act of real sacrificial love that he submitted to the surgery and was set free to love again and restore his marriage. This is a dramatic example of the saving and liberating power of real love. The saving and liberating power of the real love of Jesus, who was disfigured himself for our sins and transgressions. It is a love that does not depend on who we are, but on who Jesus is. It is a love that does not depend on what we have done, but on what Jesus did for us on Calvary's cross. I read somewhere that when some banks train people to recognize counterfeit money, they don't acquaint them with counterfeit money at first. Rather, before they deal with counterfeit money, the banks let them handle real money and get acquainted with all the features of real money. The banks know that when trainees become fully acquainted with the real thing, they will not have any problems recognizing counterfeit money. And I began to think if my friend had had the opportunity to handle a real Rolex and had become fully acquainted with its features, he may have been better prepared to recognize a cheap imitation. Jesus, first of all, showed the disciples not the counterfeit love, but the real love. As he prepared the Passover meal with them, the Bible recounts that he got up from the table and took off his outer robe and tied a towel around his waist and poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and washed them with the towel that was tied around him. And then he returned to the table and said to them, so if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done for you. And then he summed up his concern for them when he said, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. It is an invitation and a call for them and us to get real and present a united front to a divided, hostile, and suspicious world by hanging together with acts of love. The challenge is real. Racism is still alive and well. We're still the last to be hired and the first to be fired. We still have less access to medical care. In the face of all these and other challenges, the love of Jesus saves and liberates us to get real by hanging together in acts of love. The story was told of an African village that practiced the principle of hanging together in acts of love. Therefore, it was understood that if any one of the members of the village was in trouble, all were in trouble, and all would come to the aid of that one. One lived high on a hill above the rest of the people, looked down and saw that a dam was about to break and destroy the lives of the people below. Time was of the essence. He did not have time to go down and warn them, so he decided to set his house on fire, hoping that if they saw that his house was on fire, they would follow the principle of hanging together in acts of love and rush up the hill to help him. So upon seeing their brother's house on fire, they followed the principle of hanging together in acts of love. They all rushed up the hill to help their brother who was in trouble. And as soon as they got to the top of the hill, they heard a loud crash. And they looked back and saw that the dam below had broken. They then realized that in hanging together in acts of love to save one of their number who was in trouble, they also saved their own lives. Therein, beloved, lies our hope in a broken, hostile, and suspicious world. There's a problem. By the power of the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can solve it. There's a burden. By the power of the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can lift it together. If there's a mountain, by the power of the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can climb it. If there's a stone, by the power of the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in love, we can move it together. If there's a challenge, by the power of the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can meet it together. If there's a race, by the liberating power of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can run it together. If there's a fence, by the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can climb over it together. If there's a fault, by the liberating love of Jesus that enables us to hang together in acts of love, we can fix it together. St. Thomas' love is the way. Not only for the world, but for our church. And let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Love one another as I have loved you. And then I think I heard somebody say, I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despair and crying, from the waters lifted me. Now safe am I